Imagine this. You forgot where you left your keys. Then you can't remember your neighbor's name even though you've been greeting them for 10 years. And a month later, you suddenly don't recognize your own daughter. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But for millions of people around the world, this is the reality of dementia. What if I told you that these changes start happening in your brain 15 to 20 years before the first symptoms appear? And that modern medicine knows about this, but few doctors tell patients the whole truth. Today, we're going to talk about what really happens in the brain during dementia. Not general phrases from medical brochures, but specific processes that you can understand and potentially influence. If you're over 50 years old or have relatives in this age group, this video is for you. Most people think dementia is simply memory loss in elderly people, but that's a huge oversimplification. Dementia is progressive destruction of brain tissue that affects not only memory, but also thinking, speech, the ability to recognize loved ones, and even control basic bodily functions. Your brain consists of approximately 86 billion neurons connected by trillions of connections. To put this in perspective, that's more connections than there are stars in the observable universe. Imagine this as a huge metropolis with roads, bridges, communication systems, power grids, and underground networks. With dementia, this city gradually crumbles. First, small pathways disappear, then major highways, and eventually entire neighborhoods collapse into darkness. But here's what's important to understand. This process doesn't start suddenly at 70. Research from the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins shows that brain changes begin as early as 40 to 50 years old, sometimes even earlier. It's just that for a long time, our brain is able to compensate for damage by using alternative pathways, like traffic rerouting around construction zones. The most insidious feature of dementia is that it starts unnoticed. Abnormal proteins begin accumulating in your brain, beta amyloid and tau protein. Imagine rust and debris starting to build up in the city's pipes, slowly but steadily choking the flow of vital resources. Beta amyloid forms sticky plaques between neurons, disrupting their communication with each other. Think of it like thick tar being poured over telephone lines. These plaques aren't just passive obstacles, they actively trigger inflammatory responses that kill healthy brain cells. Tau protein creates tangles inside the neurons themselves, destroying them from within. If neurons are like trees, tau tangles are like parasitic vines that strangle the life out of their host. This process can last 10 to 20 years before you notice the first memory problems. Recent research from Harvard Medical School has shown that these proteins don't accumulate randomly. They follow predictable patterns, starting in specific brain regions and spreading like a slow-moving infection through neural networks. The frightening part? By the time symptoms appear, you may have already lost 30 to 50% of neurons in affected areas. Here's the story of Sarah, one of our regular listeners from Phoenix, Arizona. At 52, she began noticing that she was writing down important tasks more often so she wouldn't forget them. She blamed it on work stress and her demanding job as a financial advisor. Everyone forgets things, she told herself. 5 years later, she occasionally forgot colleagues' names during important meetings. She developed clever strategies to hide this, using phrases like, "my friend here," or quickly changing the subject. Her family noticed she was becoming more organized with lists and calendars, but praised her for being so detail-oriented. At 59, Sarah's husband noticed she sometimes got confused driving to familiar places. She would take wrong turns to the grocery store they'd visited weekly for 15 years. She blamed construction and road changes. And at 62, after several concerning incidents, including leaving the stove on all night and forgetting her grandson's birthday party, doctors diagnosed her with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Positron emission tomography scanning studies showed that amyloid accumulation in her brain began around age 45. So the disease had been developing for 17 years before it became obvious. During all those years, while Sarah was living her life, raising her children, advancing in her career, the molecular machinery of destruction was working tirelessly in the background. When abnormal proteins reach critically high levels, they begin actively destroying synapses, the connection points between neurons. It's as if bridges were being blown up and telephone lines cut in our brain city. But the destruction follows a cruel logic. The first areas to suffer are those responsible for new memories, the hippocampus and adjacent structures in the temporal lobe. That's why people with dementia can perfectly remember their wedding day 30 years ago, but forget a conversation that took place an hour ago. The brain's filing system breaks down, new files can't be stored, but old ones remain intact, at least initially. Interesting fact, women suffer from Alzheimer's disease twice as often as men. For a long time, this was explained by the fact that women simply live longer. But recent studies from Stanford University have shown that estrogen protects the female brain from amyloid accumulation by enhancing the activity of enzymes that break down these toxic proteins. After menopause, this protection disappears and the destruction process accelerates dramatically. This is why hormone replacement therapy is being studied as a potential protective measure, though the evidence is still mixed and the decision must be individualized with careful medical supervision. The accumulation of abnormal proteins triggers chronic inflammation in the brain. Microglia, the brain's immune system cells, are supposed to act like cleanup crews, clearing away damaged tissues and foreign invaders. But in dementia, something goes terribly wrong. These microglia become overactivated and begin attacking healthy neurons. It's like firefighters trying to put out a small kitchen fire but flooding an entire city block with water, destroying everything in their path. The inflammation that was supposed to help becomes an additional factor of destruction. This neuroinflammation creates a vicious cycle. Damaged neurons release signals that attract more microglia, which cause more damage, which attracts even more immune cells. Recent research suggests that controlling this inflammatory response might be key to slowing dementia progression. At this stage, people begin to notice serious problems. They forget routes in familiar places, confuse day and night, can't cope with simple tasks like cooking or paying bills. This is often when families first seek medical help, though the process has been underway for decades. The middle stages are particularly heartbreaking. A retired teacher might suddenly be unable to help her grandchild with basic arithmetic. A former engineer might stare at a simple tool, unable to remember its purpose. The person is still physically present, but their essential self, their knowledge, skills, and memories, begins to fade like an old photograph. Gradually, the destruction affects more and more areas of the brain. Centers responsible for speech, facial recognition, emotional control, and even basic functions like swallowing and breathing are affected. Language becomes fragmented. First, complex concepts disappear, then simple words, until communication becomes impossible. Imagine a city after a major earthquake. Electricity, water, and communications are cut off. Hospitals and schools are destroyed. Transportation systems collapse. Individual buildings may still be standing, but the system as a whole doesn't function. The infrastructure that makes life possible simply crumbles away. At this stage, people may not recognize close relatives, lose the ability to speak, and become completely dependent on care. The brain literally forgets how to control the body. A mother might look at her devoted son and see only a stranger. A grandfather might become frightened by his own reflection. The loss of executive function means they can't plan, sequence actions, or make decisions. Getting dressed becomes impossible because the brain can't coordinate the complex series of movements required. Eating becomes dangerous because the swallowing reflex fails. In the final stage, damage reaches the brainstem, the area that controls breathing, heartbeat, and other vital functions. The person loses the ability to eat independently, swallow, or control bladder and bowel functions. They may sleep most of the day, and when awake, they might not respond to voices or touch. Death from dementia usually doesn't occur directly from the disease, but from complications. Pneumonia from aspirating food, urinary tract infections from incontinence, or heart failure as the body systems shut down. The average survival time from diagnosis is 8 to 10 years, but this varies greatly. Here are signs to watch for long before obvious memory problems appear. These subtle changes often occur 5 to 15 years before diagnosis, when intervention might still make a difference. Changes in smell. The ability to distinguish odors is often impaired 5 to 10 years before diagnosis. The olfactory bulb, which processes smells, has direct connections to memory centers and is often affected early. If you've stopped smelling your morning coffee, favorite perfume, or can't detect when food has spoiled, this could be an early signal. Some research suggests that simple smell tests could be used for early screening. Sleep problems. Deep sleep disruptions prevent the brain from clearing toxic proteins through the glymphatic system, essentially the brain's waste disposal network that works primarily during sleep. If you've started sleeping restlessly, wake up frequently, have vivid nightmares, or feel tired after a full night's sleep, this is cause for concern. REM sleep behavior disorder, where people act out their dreams, is particularly concerning. Changes in gait and balance. The cerebellum and basal ganglia, responsible for movement coordination, are affected quite early. Increased falls, unsteadiness while walking, or changes in stride length may be first signs. Some people develop a shuffling walk or have trouble with complex movements like dancing or playing sports they once enjoyed. Depression and apathy. Emotional changes often precede cognitive ones by years. If a loved one has become apathetic, lost interest in hobbies, or become more irritable, this could be the beginning of dementia. Often this is blamed on stress or age-related changes, but it can be a warning signal. Problems with time orientation, confusion about dates, days of the week, inability to plan ahead are early signs of frontal lobe damage. A person might forget what year it is or not understand the sequence of events. Besides age and genetics, there are factors that significantly increase risk but are rarely discussed. Social isolation. Loneliness literally kills the brain. Studies show that people with minimal social contacts have a 50% higher risk of dementia. The brain needs stimulation from interaction, like muscles need exercise. Hearing loss. Poor hearing forces the brain to spend more resources processing sounds, which accelerates cognitive decline. A properly fitted hearing aid can significantly reduce risks. When the brain can't hear clearly, it redirects resources from other functions, including memory. Type 2 diabetes. High blood sugar levels damage brain vessels and promote amyloid plaque formation. Dementia is sometimes even called type 3 diabetes because the brain becomes resistant to insulin. Chronic stress. Constantly elevated cortisol levels destroy the hippocampus, the main memory center. People who live in constant stress for years are literally burning their brains from the inside. Poor air quality. Air pollution, especially fine particles, can penetrate the brain through nasal pathways and cause inflammation. People living in areas with high air pollution have higher risks of dementia. The good news is that the brain has an amazing ability to recover, called neuroplasticity. Even if the dementia process has already begun, it can be slowed or even partially reversed. Physical activity. 30 minutes of moderate exercise 5 times a week increases hippocampus size and stimulates new neuron growth. Even simple walking works. Exercise increases production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that helps neurons grow and survive. Mediterranean diet. Olive oil, fish, nuts, vegetables, and fruits provide the brain with antioxidants and beneficial fats. Studies show a 35% reduction in dementia risk. Particularly important are omega-3 fatty acids, which form the structural foundation of the brain. Intellectual activity. Learning new languages, playing musical instruments, solving puzzles, create new neural connections. The brain needs challenges to stay strong. Reading, learning new skills, even computer games can help. Quality sleep. 7 to 9 hours of deep sleep are necessary for clearing toxic proteins from the brain. Practice good sleep hygiene, dark room, cool temperature, no screens before bed. Social connections. Regular communication with friends and family supports cognitive function better than any medication. Loneliness is a risk factor equal to smoking or obesity. Stress management. Meditation, yoga, deep breathing, all of these help lower cortisol levels and protect the brain. Even 10 minutes of meditation per day can make a difference. The emerging science is showing us that what we do in our 40s and 50s matters enormously for our brain health decades later. The lifestyle choices you make today are either building cognitive reserve or accelerating decline. Think of cognitive reserve like a savings account. Every healthy meal, every workout, every meaningful conversation, every book you read is making a deposit. When disease tries to withdraw from this account, you want to have built up enough reserves to maintain function. Recent studies have also highlighted the importance of purpose and meaning in life. People who have a strong sense of purpose, whether it's caring for grandchildren, volunteering, or pursuing creative projects, show remarkable resistance to cognitive decline. The brain thrives when it has reasons to stay engaged. Sleep deserves special attention because it's during sleep that the brain literally washes itself. The glymphatic system opens up channels between brain cells, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flush out the toxic proteins that accumulate during waking hours. People who consistently get poor sleep are essentially letting these toxins build up night after night. The role of inflammation cannot be overstated. Chronic inflammation from poor diet, lack of exercise, stress, or untreated medical conditions creates an environment where dementia can flourish. Anti-inflammatory strategies, whether through diet, exercise, or stress reduction, are some of our most powerful tools. Music therapy has shown remarkable results in dementia care. Even in advanced stages, people often retain musical memories and can be reached through familiar songs. Music activates multiple brain networks simultaneously and can temporarily restore connection and awareness. The gut-brain connection is another frontier we're just beginning to understand. The bacteria in your intestines communicate directly with your brain through the vagus nerve and by producing neurotransmitters. A healthy gut microbiome, supported by diverse plant foods and fermented products, may be crucial for brain health. Temperature regulation becomes increasingly important as we age. The brain is sensitive to both heat and cold extremes. Maintaining comfortable living environments and staying hydrated becomes more critical for cognitive function. The social aspects of dementia are often overlooked but equally devastating. Watching a loved one disappear while their body remains is a unique form of grief. Families need support systems, respite care, and understanding that caregiving for someone with dementia is one of the most challenging experiences humans can face. Early intervention programs are showing promise. When people with mild cognitive impairment engage in comprehensive lifestyle interventions, combining exercise, cognitive training, social engagement, and medical optimization, significant improvements are possible. The brain's plasticity means it's never too late to start, though earlier is always better. Technology is becoming an ally in this fight. Apps that monitor sleep, track cognitive function, provide brain training, and even detect changes in speech patterns are giving us new tools for early detection and intervention. The economic impact of dementia is staggering. The global cost exceeds $1 trillion annually, and this will only increase as populations age. But the human cost, the loss of memories, relationships, and dignity, cannot be measured in dollars. Research into dementia is accelerating rapidly. New drugs targeting amyloid and TIU proteins are in trials. Immunotherapies that train the immune system to clear toxic proteins show promise. Gene therapies, stem cell treatments, and even focused ultrasound to open the blood-brain barrier are being explored. But we don't have to wait for miracle cures. The tools for prevention are available right now, today. Every meal is a choice between inflammation and healing. Every day is an opportunity to move your body, challenge your mind, connect with others, and manage stress. Dementia is not an inevitability of aging, but a disease that can be prevented or significantly delayed. The earlier you start caring for brain health, the better your chances of maintaining mental clarity into advanced age. Remember, every day you choose a healthy lifestyle, you're investing in your cognitive future. Your brain isn't just an organ, it's the foundation of your personality, memories, and ability to love. If this video was helpful, share it with loved ones. Subscribe to Everyday Health Podcast, where we'll continue discussing how to maintain health and vitality after 50. Because your health isn't a matter of chance, but the result of conscious decisions.